delighted to have you guys all here today to participate in this discussion and to share your opinions. We are also very fortunate to have such experts and leaders here today to speak to you all. These leaders include our keynote speaker, Walter Lamb, and our panel of experts, Dr. Ron Johnson, Kathy Anderson, and Ahmed Hashid. I want to thank you all for coming here tonight because I know that you guys are all very busy, and you guys coming here proves that this is not just an international issue, but this is also an issue that needs to be brought into San Diego and on a national level. To tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Justine Jacoby, and I am a third-year graduate student here at the University of San Diego, studying mental health counseling. I'm very excited about this event, especially since my specialization is violence, abuse, and trauma. And so I am really looking forward to hearing all the challenging and exciting and inspirational news that we have tonight. I would also like to recognize Asian Students in Action. It is an organization here on the university campus. They are involved in many projects all around campus, and this is part of their Asia Loves USD projects. I would also like to introduce a fellow student and a good friend of mine, Nick Boyd. He is going to tell you guys a little bit about the organization, Friends with Orphans. Without them, none of this would be possible because they are actually doing the groundwork in Uganda. Nick?
Thanks everybody again for coming tonight. You guys are a wonderful group of people. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first, and then I'll talk a little bit about Friends of Orphans, kind of why we're partnering with them, the work that we're planning on doing, and then we're going to show about a 10-minute video that they put together that our sponsor, their sponsor, that have some shirts sitting in the back. They're the ones that fund a lot of the schools and other social services, in addition to international and national campaigns that go on. But my name is Nick Boyd. I am a third-year graduate student here at University of San Diego in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. My specialty and focus is in violence with adults and children. However, my first very personal passion and interest is in child soldiers, which is why we are doing this event, bringing a little bit of awareness to it. And Justine so kindly has been working with me, and we'll go into a little more detail about that later. The biggest missing link that you're going to find in most of these organizations throughout Eastern Africa is the mental health component. Part of that is due to lack of knowledge. Another part of that is due to funding, and people not really not having a sense or an idea of how to establish it, who to go to, who to reach out to, and how to kind of bridge that gap. So we see a lot of children, both in Uganda and East Africa, and when I say Uganda, even though we're talking about Uganda, we can generalize that to be any child or family that have been exposed to the conflict that's been occurring in Eastern Africa over the many decades. But you'll experience, a lot of the children there will experience these high degrees of trauma, and they'll receive amazing services from a lot of these NGOs that you hear of and know of, FRO being one of those. But again, there's no mental health component, which is why this issue is new. I feel it's new. I feel it's exciting, and I feel like it's very important because we see a lot of these children and refugees, especially here in San Diego and Southern California, being one of the largest East African refugees in the entire country, coming over here, having these significant traumas, these significant PTSD issues, but not having the resources or the places to go to deal with these issues. So that's kind of why we're doing this, and I wanted to make that aware at the very beginning, because I understand that there was a significant burnout on Uganda and the LRA through the Coney 2012 campaign that Invisible Children ran. And I also want to highlight that FRO is not part of Invisible Children. They aren't in support of a lot of the military action that Invisible Children campaigns to do. So that's a pretty clear distinction that I feel like I should make up front. So with that said, let me tell you a little bit about Friends of Orphans. I spoke a little bit about kind of their mission. Ricky, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. because I will ruin it. But Ricky is the gentleman. He's the executive director, the president that founded Friends of Orphans. And he did it as someone who escaped the conflict in Uganda. He was abducted at a very early age and established that organization that we partnered with to bring this wonderful event here today. In addition to the rehabilitative programs, they also work with mothers, they work with families, and they also work to combat the spread of HIV and AIDS that I feel like most of us are aware of being an issue in Africa. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and we'll show about a 10-minute video that FRO produced to kind of get you a better idea of what they're involved in.
They force you to do anything they like. You go and kill, or you go and loot. If you fail to do, they will kill you. Imagine.
A generation of children who've known nothing but war, forced to be soldiers and sex slaves.
Especially when you were a young girl. You were forced many times to have sex. I don't think my life will ever be the same again.
If you try to escape and are caught, they chop off a part of your body each day, so you die in terrible pain. I saw that happen to my brother.
The scars of war are visible everywhere in northern Uganda. But it's the invisible scars, the scars of memory, that are the hardest for these children to heal.
When I'm sitting idle and I'm not doing anything, I get a vision of the man I killed.
A normal life seems impossible for children forced to terrorize their own communities. But a groundbreaking organization is helping them recover. A big reason for the group's success? Its leader was once a child soldier himself. Ricky Richard Anwar calls himself a child born of trouble. But his early childhood, here in this now abandoned farmhouse, was happy until the war came to visit.
We had a gunshot. I got scared. I knew that, oh, today we have been abducted.
Ricky was 14. Instead of running, his parents stood their ground while rebels captured Ricky and a brother.
What I saw is they were putting them, all of them, my mom, my dad, my sisters, my brothers, and they put them in that grass thatch house. And they locked the door and they set it ablaze. They were crying in the house for help and all that. It was horrible.
His family was burned alive.
It was the toughest moment I think I've ever seen in my life.
25,000 children have been abducted during the 2 decades of conflict in northern Uganda. Marched from their villages at gunpoint, many turned into orphans, all forced into slavery.
We were always made to kill other people. I walked the whole night, and when it was dawn, they made us kill my uncle. The rebels do that because they know when you kill your own relatives, you have nowhere to go, so you stick with them.
We were being forced to kill. They would bring people, line them up, and ask us to kill. One day, We were made to walk over dead bodies. I didn't like it, but I had no choice. I walked on the dead bodies too.
Children rarely escape the rebels, but those who do are welcome at Friends of Orphans. Every year, 200 former slaves begin rehabilitation here. They learn work skills, receive business training, and get tools to start small enterprises.
Friends of Orphans is very important to me because it's my only ray of hope. I didn't hope to go back to school, but here I'm learning tailoring to help me in the future.
I'm working very hard to learn carpentry skills because I'll be able to make money for myself. I didn't get a formal education, so there's no other alternative for me.
Ana Moruba. Ana be the program director, my Friends of Orphans.
Ricky built Friends of Orphans after he escaped the rebels and graduated from university. The project helps people grow food, cope with HIV and AIDS, and resolve conflicts without resorting to violence. Former child soldiers get special counseling. Ricky knows firsthand they need help to overcome the trauma and shame locked inside.
They had already lost their childhood. They lost hope in life. They don't have any confidence at all. But now we build back confidence in them. When we talk to them, they expose a lot to us. Because I talk to you using my experience in the bush. Then they tell me the whole story. Because I'm one of them, I'm part of them. And they open up.
Friends of Orphans helps to reintegrate former combatants into village life. Dramatic reenactments help break the stigma. Former child slaves demonstrate how they were kidnapped and forced to kill others.
We are sending a very strong message to the community that these children are our children. They were abducted from us. We were powerless to defend them. And they were forced to do what they have done. So we should forgive them for whatever they have done.
Sometimes the goal is to show former slaves that life can be normal again.
People gather to see that, oh, these are former child soldiers now doing this. It builds confidence in them and even the hope that, oh, I think I'm not all that hated the way I thought the community hates me.
Ricky's work has been dangerous. He's been ambushed and almost killed along these roads. He started Friends of Orphans before international groups dared to come here, and he vows to stay no matter what. People in northern Uganda see Ricky as a hero. His group supports more than 1,000 children in schools. But Ricky sees himself as a simple community servant who's turned his freedom into a lifeline for others.
Okay, good. Out of the horrible things which I've gone through, has created a very beautiful thing for the community. I dedicate my work to my parents who died because of me. Okay. I believe that somewhere, wherever they are seeing what I'm doing, and they're happy about what I'm doing. And I believe that this is the only way I can pay them back. Okay, Kakare.
This song recognizes Friends of Orphans in northern Uganda. PSG la bon. What a jolly comment. What low. Watching creepers pass by with an him shaped like questions. In that clothes, there's still no rose, moving and looking for the best in life. Though life is full of strife, we love peace and
As you guys were able to see a little bit through the video and some of the discussion that was mentioned is that they're doing some pretty amazing work in Uganda, which is why we were very honored when Friends of Orphans reached out to us to bring you this event and specifically looking at the PTSD and trauma. Like I said before, no other organization or no other group has bothered to talk about this PTSD trauma, specifically from a clinical setting. So with that being said, their interest when they approached us was to not only bring awareness, discussion, an informational session, but to also help bridge that gap. And so we're going to be going to Uganda in the future, in the near future, and implementing the clinical component that is missing from Friends of Orphans, specifically this organization. So that's the next step, in addition to the conversation and the dialogue that we're going to create today. So I encourage you guys all to think of questions, to think of concerns that you have, anything that you feel as you're learning, as you're experiencing this. It is a bit humbling, I feel like, moving and sad in many ways. To ask our panel some of those things that maybe you feel like you wouldn't be able to in another setting. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and excuse me, that's my phone going off here. We'll go ahead and introduce Walter Lamb. And let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Lamb. Walter Lamb is the president and CEO of Alliance for African Assistance. Walter Lamb was born and raised in northern Uganda. After high school graduation, he fled political persecution to Kenya and went to Egerton University, where he graduated in agricultural engineering. He returned to Uganda in 1981 and worked with the government in various management positions. In 1986, he again fled political persecution to Kenya, and by the end of the year, he found himself in San Diego. Upon arrival to the United States, Walter recognized that there were no programs that addressed the needs of African refugees arriving in San Diego. In 1989, he founded Alliance for African Assistance with the purpose of helping fellow refugees from Africa. Over the past 20 years, the Alliance has greatly expanded to serving thousands of refugees from all over the world. Walter has served on the California Refugee Health Advisory Board, the California State Advisory Committee for Refugees, the California Refugee Forum, the Community Building of United Way, the Prostate Cancer Community Advisory Committee of the Scripps Cancer Center, and the Intergroup Relationship Advisory Committee of the San Diego Foundation. He is also a member of the Mayor Dick Murphy's African American Advisory Board. He is currently a member of the City of San Diego International Affairs Board, the Heartland Human Relations and Fair Housing Association Board, and the Christian Community Foundation of Southern California. In addition, he is a recipient of the United Way of San Diego Ben Pollock Award of Excellence and has been highlighted as a prominent refugee by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCD. At this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. Walter Lamb.
Thank you so much, Justine and Nick, for inviting me to come and speak with you here. It's an honor for me to stand in front of you here and speak on behalf of my people. It pains me through both my elementary and high school education in northern Uganda. I never had to fear for my life until Idi Amin came to power. That was when the whole of my family was affected and we had to leave Uganda, went into Kenya. During Idi Amin's time, his focus was on people that he thought were a threat to his government. Not every single person that we have witnessed in this present time under the present government that we have in Uganda at the moment. When the struggle and the war began between the government of Uganda and the Lord Resistance Army, that was in 1986. And my talk with you here, I'm going to be focusing on all children that were 11 years of age in 1986, and all those that were born after 1986, because this is the population that has been affected most. I never knew in my life of child soldiers. This child soldiers issue started coming up when the president himself came in TV here, announcing it was a normal thing for children to be trained to go and kill. And after that, I started hearing of child soldiers in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and on and on. The origin of it all started in Uganda. So I'm speaking, focusing on people and kids that were 11-year-old in 1986 to all those that were born after that. Because those were the prime age that LRA came and abducted people and kids of that age to take them to fight for them. In 1989, the government of Uganda, after a long time of fighting with the LRA, they decided that the only way to defeat LRA was to drive everybody in northern Uganda and eastern Uganda into camps. And they gave them 24 hours. And after the 24 hours, you don't make it to these camps, you are treated like a rebel. Yes, those that were able and have ways of getting to the camps made it into the camps. And these camps, you may think it's a protective camp for people, the civilians that are being driven and taken away from LRA. The way the camp was designed, a military barracks is at the center, and it's surrounded with civilians around it. You would think the military should be out there to protect these people. It wasn't the case in Uganda. So after the 24 hours that was given to people to get into these camps, there were people that had many children that could not make it within the 24 hours. Elderly people that could not move that fast. The government ordered that anybody that camps would just be bombed and killed. Can you imagine how many children, women, and the elderly that were killed just because they could not make it into the camp? And in these camps as well, these people were just driven into an open field. No housing, no food, no water, no hygiene, and on and on and on. At that time, people died at a rate of 1,500 weekly because of the inhuman condition that they were put in. These people were forced to relocate, and everybody that went into this IDP camp, and the whole region, the entire region, lost economy, we lost tradition, we lost all the social network. Homes were burned. Granaries that we used to keep food were all burned because they did not want the rebel to have access to food. My dear friends, these camps turned out to be the best place for LRA to go and grab children at night because they are all in one location. And that's what continued to happen. Over this period, we lost, as the video indicated up there, 25,000 kids that were abducted from the various camps that had military barracks inside. The civilians protecting the military. Can you imagine children getting out to just go and use bathroom out there and wind up being abducted by LRA? And immediately these kids are abducted. They are considered rebels. They are considered enemies. The government starts following them and killing them just like LRAs. The question here is you did not provide protection for these kids. You allowed them to be taken. And now you go to kill them. This is what has been going on in Uganda for a long time. Two young men, Joel and Martin, just went to use the bathroom. They were abducted. Immediately, the military started following them. Martin was shot and killed. Joel was 11, Martin 14. Just because the protection was not given to them. And it's the work of the government to provide protection to the citizen. And they are abducted. Martin ended up being killed. They continued with Joel, carrying the looted stuff, went into the bush. instructed him to do all these ugly things that we have seen in the video. Otherwise, he would be killed if he never followed those instructions. I can't thank Ricky enough for the wonderful work you're doing, the work for the Friends of Orphans. Because these are the only institutions that will be there and has been there for these people. All these NGOs that we know of just go there when the funding is there, they run out of the money, they are out of there. People like Rick are the only ones that are there. I am blessed that with my work with the Alliance for African Assistance, 7 years ago, my board of directors allowed me to open an office in northern Uganda. And right now, we are serving people there. We have about 100 kids that we have sponsored at the moment. Wonderful Americans here in San Diego giving us just $25 a month. This money goes a long way to help these people. Pay school fees, buy uniform, pay for food, and also in some cases take care of medical care. So one time, Martin, brother, managed to escape from the LRA. In 1999, I was driving and going to work. I got a call from a friend in Uganda. And he asked me, Walter, are you able to speak? I told him I'm driving. And he told me, when you get to the office, call me. And I called. At that time, I was going through the immigration process of bringing my son here. I was told he was beaten up by the Ugandan police, thrown into the police cell, and left there to die. And he died. There is nothing that I know of that is as painful as outliving a child. I don't know when. And thousands of parents in northern Uganda and the world over at the moment have lost children because of stupid things that could be prevented. There's somebody sticking and want to be in power. Somebody taking advantage of children. These are some of the things we are faced with here. In my job, I'm also blessed that I bring refugees for their resettlement here in San Diego. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. years ago, I was blessed to start bringing people from northern Uganda here to San Diego after serious campaign out there. Quite a number of them, I'm thankful to report to you, are doing fine. I have one young man that went through very painful experience before coming here. He was riding a bike with his brother and was met on the way by the army. They were accused to be collaborators of LRA. They took his brother, killed him right in front of them. And this other young man was beaten, left to die. He escaped, went into Kenya. Was one of those that I managed to bring to San Diego here. This young man started working very well. Serious about his job. Time came that he could not wake up to go to work. He came to the office one day to me and told me, people that killed his brother came to his house and knocked at night. And he tried to jump out of the window before he woke up. After a month, I got a call and somebody told me, come and check on this young man here. He was standing on the side of the road, dressed in white, with his hand like this. In the hot summer, he started standing out in the morning. I came to him and asked him, you have been here for a long time, can you go and rest? Saliva is coming out of his mouth. I gave him water to drink. He refused. According to him, he is the only Son of God. And right now, he is in one of the centers out there that is taking care of people in his condition. These are some of the things we are dealing with here on a daily basis because of the situation that has taken place in their home country. A lot of people ask, why has this war, civil war, taken so long? And it's one of the longest civil war in Africa. I would tell you there is no political will to end the war. This same government in Uganda, with crisis that we have in Uganda, went into Rwanda, changed the government there. went into Congo, changed the government there, and took portion of that country for a long, long time until they looked at everything out of there. Now, what would it take for this government not to protect its own people in its own territory? Our explanation is the war turned into a money-making machine. Going for help out there and saying, oh, we need to fight these people, and on and on and on, people sending money. The other thing that we have heard of, CON 2012. I now regret that when this idea of invisible children started, they came to my office and I connected them with Uganda. When they went there, we provided them even a vehicle from my office for them to use. These people have wealth of information that will tell the truth about what is going on in Uganda and the child soldiers issues. I saw it myself, what they have. Something somewhere happened that what they are producing now is in no way different from what you would see coming out from Uganda government itself. And I asked, where happened to the rest of the documentary that you had out there? Now they are advocating for military solution. You have heard from Rick out there stating clearly that these people that we are considering, these kids that we are looking at and looking at as rebels or terrorists at the moment, were abducted because we did not provide protection for them. And now we want to go and kill all of them? That has been the biggest protest of the Ugandan community here in San Diego and also in Uganda. Dr. Olara Otuno, former special representative of UN Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, stated that the Uganda government has committed genocide. And you know, this is a word that everybody would want to avoid out there because of the responsibility that comes with it. A local paper in Uganda reported that Uganda has the highest rate of post-traumatic stress disorder and mental illness in the whole world. And in Gulu district alone, this is a district that has a population of just 200,000. Within a period of 3 months, 51 people committed suicide. I repeat, 51 people committed suicide within a period of 3 months. The paper blames the rise in suicide to the continued absence of counseling services. Thank you, Nick. To the people that have been affected for over 20 years of civil war, high level of trauma and depression. The most common complaint that you hear from all these people committing suicides are feeling helpless, feeling taken advantage of, feeling like things will never ever get better, unresolved abuses, and inability to deal with the inhuman situation that they're faced with here. And I think you will agree with me that all these conditions can be resolved through counseling. What do these people need? First and foremost, I would say counseling. And at the moment, the statistic states, in the whole of Uganda, there are only 30 psychologists for populations of 30 million. That is one person, one psychologist for 1 million people. And then unfortunately, where there is this crisis, nobody wants to go there. So they are left with 0 psychologists to help them. The other thing too, these young people never had opportunity to go to school and be productive. I think trade school would help a lot. And I'm thankful to Ricky for what he's doing out there. These are some of the things that are needed. Lastly, I would say truth-telling will help a lot. Through truth-telling and reconciliation. You still see people driving around that have massacred your parents, and we wonder why you commit suicide. I want to thank you very, very much for coming. I want to thank you, the organizers, for bringing us together here. You're giving us hope that these young people are not forgotten. Continue with the good work. And I'm excited to hear that you have connections with Uganda and you're doing some work out there and planning even to do more with Ricky. Whatever I can do to help, let me know. I look forward to hearing the rest of the deliberation. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and give Walter another round of applause. It was important to me, Nick, that we give back to you for all the work that you do in Uganda and here in San Diego. So we want to present you with an appreciation plaque that says, an appreciation for your individual knowledge and concerned dedication so generously given. At this time, we would like to move right into our panel portion of the night. So panelists, will you please come up here and take a seat? And his interests lie in forensic, ethical and legal issues, police psychology, risk assessment, and trauma. And he's one of our favorite teachers in the program. He's one of our only teachers. Next, I would like to introduce you to Kathy Anderson, who I had the pleasure to meet tonight and look forward to working with her in the future. Kathy Anderson serves as the Executive Director and co-founder of Survivors of Torture Pacific Schools of International Studies and San Diego State's University School of Social Work. Previously, she has served on the board of directors for Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, as well as Amnesty National USA. She also founded Lutheran Social Services of Idaho. Kathy was also one of the recipients of KPBS's Women History Month Local Hero in 2011. We're very honored to have you here tonight.
Our final panelist with us today is Mr. Ahmed Saeed. He is the president and CEO of Somali Family Services, a community organization, social service nonprofit organization is dedicated to improving the well-being and creating self-sufficiency of Somali and other East African refugee families in San Diego County through access to healthcare, economic development, youth leadership, and family strengthening. Being a refugee himself, Ahmed knows firsthand the difficulties in adjusting to a new culture and environment. Therefore, he advocates for alleviating the obstacles that refugees face on both local and national level. Mr. Saeed was the recipient of KPBS Local Hero Award in 2010 and Lead San Diego's Community Spotlight Award this year. Ruthie Inike will serve as our panel facilitator this evening. She's a student from USD who's pursuing her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. She takes on many different professional roles on and off campus. Some of these roles include president and founder of the Asian Students in Action organization, a project manager and communication specialist, motivational speaker and inspirational coach, a Rainbow educator at the organization Rainbow Educators, and is a member of the Counseling Academic and Professional Honor Society, Chi Sigma Iota.
Welcome.
So then, let's begin. Are there any questions for our panel? You can just raise your hand.
What do you guys see as the number one difficulty with having students go over to Uganda and implementing a mental health component?
Is this working? Oh, it is working. Okay. One of the things that I think is an issue is the training that you get is one that prepares you to recognize clinical issues that might come up. But when you work in a different country, a different culture, that doesn't always translate. The concepts of mental health may not be something that is translatable in the language of the country that you're going to, so it becomes much more difficult. So the techniques and strategies that you use may not be as effective because you're working through a translator, you're working with cultural barriers, you're working with gender barriers, all these issues that kind of come up and prevent you from connecting the way that you want to connect. And so that becomes a real challenge, I think, when you work outside of your own sort of comfort zone in this kind of areas.
I think probably one of the challenges and things to think about in advance is the concept of vicarious trauma. I assume you've done some readings around that or are aware of that. That's something, for those who aren't aware of vicarious trauma, it's also called secondary trauma. It's different than burnout, it's different than stress. And it's when you hear lots of stories of trauma, or it's one particular story of trauma that affects you so that you begin, as a care provider, to begin to have symptoms similar to the clients you're trying to help. So you might all of a sudden start feeling really angry and irritated, and you don't know why, or depressed and sad, or you have intrusive thoughts. In other words, you start having vicarious traumatization. And there are ways to counteract that. So one is to understand it. to be aware of it. There's a name for it, and a lot of good material now on the web about it. 2 is to have a balance in your life. And that means also in Uganda, to have professional boundaries, to take time out for yourself. 3 is to really stay connected to what's meaningful and identify what that is here now. So for some people, it might be their faith. So if you are very faithful, you read Holy Scriptures and you pray here, continue those practices when you go to Uganda. If it's family that's very meaningful for you, stay connected to those family members. Make phone calls back here. If it is nature, make sure that you get out and enjoy nature there as well as here. And then tell people about these connections. Have a support system. Check in with each other. And then you're going to be healthier for those people that you're providing services to. If you're not healthy, you're not going to be effective. Now, to just respond a little bit to what your professor said, couldn't agree with him more. And I would never underestimate or undervalue rapport and openness. And yes, there are going to be differences in everything. But I also think that humans understand when you're trying to understand and you're trying to help. That heartfelt response, the openness of your heart is beyond words. And to remember that when you go out and you practice your trade.
And I'll add to, I think understanding the cultural component is very important, particularly before you even go to Uganda. The role of gender, I think, is very important also in terms of, in some communities, that terminology and how you approach is different from what we know. So I think becoming familiar and knowing that what that community and even what they call they may not call mental health. Knowing those things I think is very important.
I'm wondering, and perhaps Mr. Lamb, you might speak to this too. I'm not sure what the condition in the country is, if there is still the civil war going on where it's actively unsafe. I see where Ricky is, creating an environment where children are cared for and all of that. I'm wondering though how when you work with trauma victims, if they have to go back into the Civil War. I mean, if it's still going on, if there's still abductions and or even he was at risk. How do we square that with the work that we want to do? The surrounding environment is still not safe. And that kind of works against helping them, deal with their issues. Can you speak to that? I'm not that knowledgeable. And how it relates to the mental health counseling.
We are blessed in Uganda at the moment. We have peace now in northern Uganda. The rebel group that was creating all this problem and fighting with the government has been moved to all the way Central African Republic, and that's where they are now. And you may know also that right now, United States government has sent military advisors to Uganda, and we are praying and we are hoping that these military advisors could have been sent when these people were still killing in Uganda.
Just to add to that, whenever you have multi-generations of trauma and those kinds of things, you have what I call trauma on top of trauma. So it's difficult to kind of extract one event from another. My experience, at least here in San Diego, has been working with several African groups and providing supervision for individuals who are trained to provide services to respective African communities. And one of the things that kind of cuts across all those groups is the amazing amount of trauma that's replicated again and across generations. I still remember an experience that I had when I was consulting to see schools where I had this 6-year-old girl, and I was just walking through the campus, and she literally ran and jumped into my arms. And she was screaming and yelling, and apparently right before that, she had picked up a pair of scissors and gave to the teacher and said, "Stab me, I want to die." And as we had conversations with her parents, her mother, her grandmother at least, they told a very horrible story about what she had experienced before, witnessing deaths and refugee camps and the whole thing. So, and then of course the mother and the grandmother had their own stories that they were telling. So this little girl had to experience cross-generational trauma, and it's very, very difficult. So I think clinically speaking, it's very hard, I think, to make that translation, to make that jump when you work with those groups. And just in my experience of working with veterans, the same kind of things occur with them too, only it's more concentrated because they're in a war zone. But I can't even imagine what it would be like if we have no experience here in this country of dealing with cross-generational trauma, which translated from one generation to another. Native Americans know what that's like, I think, because of the experiences, but very few other groups can talk about the cross-generational.
Piggyback on what he has said, there's hope in breaking that chain. When children of torture or trauma don't have the opportunity to talk about what they've experienced, or they don't have a chance to play it out, because that's what children do more of than talking, they play it out. They don't have that opportunity, oftentimes then it's transmitted to the next generation. Unwittingly, unknowingly, but that's part of the nature of trauma. Interesting research, after the Holocaust, there was a group of people who said, we cannot trust people outside of our group, and we're not going to even talk about it amongst ourselves. We're going to just move forward. Much higher incidence of mental health disorders, major depression and anxiety in subsequent generations. It's like a cascading effect. So how important it is to be able to intervene, and there are ways to intervene that are clinically sound. There are best practices now, promising practices, emergency practices, that can make a difference, not just with the people you're going to be working with, but then it's going to have this wonderful, more positive effect with the children and the grandchildren.
I think the other issue is even locally, we have a very large refugee community, and I would say probably mental health is one of the most unserved and underserved, services in this community, and in part because there is no cultural and linguistically appropriate services for the refugee community here, and some clinical studies that shows there is from 39 to 100% of PTSD in the refugee community. So there is a serious issues in the community because priority is when they come to San Diego, we're trying to transition them, helping them to adjust, and you're not thinking that mental health is an issue until the next person that you're talking to, you identify there's some sort of a system that the symptoms that they have. So it's not only back in Africa and workplaces and things like that, but it's also come with the refugee who have been refugee camps for many, many years.
How do you see in addressing that issue that you were just speaking to? How do you see mental health community addressing that component, because it is significant, especially since there's such a lack in East Africa itself that we're bringing it here, and you're speaking to a little bit of now we're feeling again a little bit as a mental health system. So how do you feel that can be addressed, or how could that bridge be made?
Well, I think with the refugee service organizations that are doing as much as they could really with the limited resources that they have, but really understanding that the dynamic and impact that this community has suffered. For example, in the Somali community, we have seen, a very high rate of suicide, and particularly in men. And before the Civil War, I remember, if we were playing and kids are bullying each other and boys are fighting, and if we see anybody who is messing up with girls, there is a war. You protect. And when the Civil War happened, it's not only that they were killing people, they were kidnapping girls, they were raping, and all of that thing happened. So this issue is very deep, and understanding the nature of the mental health, train medical professionals that understand the culture and the language, changing behavior and educating the community in terms of how to identify and deal and cope with this kind of issue. Because in some cultures it's very taboo even to say, you're crazy. Just the community perception is need to be also educated and changed.
At Survivors of Torture International, we work with refugees, asylum seekers, anyone who's been tortured for political, religious, other reasons in their home countries and now live here in San Diego. And we understand that psychological scars take much longer to heal than physical scars, and the research bears that out as well. And so we provide comprehensive services. And initially we needed to provide a lot of psychosocial education, a lot. To this day, we don't call it therapy, but we call it helping, home visits, talking, and as a result, we're seeing people get better from their mental health issues. It is the most rewarding work I've ever done for that reason. Didn't happen overnight. I had a dream, and it's now happening, which is beautiful here in San Diego. So now we have people from African communities coming and saying, I want that. Sometimes they don't even know what to call it, but I want that because of the improvements that they're seeing in their friends and within the community. So there are at least 11,000 torture survivors. It doesn't happen overnight. Even our service delivery models have to change in order to adapt to these different populations. 6 visits through an HMO, it's not going to happen. 60-minute visits, it's not going to happen. So it's using culturally appropriate models, using interpreters, tight confidentiality, working with whole families in a collective system, lots of ways to go about this to get measurable, long-term, positive outcomes.
Two of the panelists mentioned culturally responsive treatment. What's the potential for your group that's going to go into Uganda to sort of collaborate with local healers and use what's on the ground already, considering the lack of traditional psychological services in the country?
That's probably the biggest challenge. One of the things we're trying to do right now is connect with people who are actually there on the ground right now to kind of find out, do the words translate? Is there a word for trauma? Is there a word for therapy, if you want to use it that way? How do they understand it? And then the other part is, as we go through the process of trying to, there's no way, Walter was saying that there's only 30 psychologists in the country, so you're not going to get an infusion of, I don't know how many people to do that. So what you have to do is create your own sort of structure there that will allow people to only provide minimal services and there to recognize, assess, and then intervene. And obviously the standards that we use here in terms of ethical practices may not work in that environment just because of the cultural overlays that are there. But you have to start someplace, and so minimally I think the best thing would be to identify who's available, who's interested in doing this, are they capable of being trained in a way that will help them to offer minimal support and recognize what the problems are. So the other part of that too, from a research standpoint, is trying to find out what prevalence is there for trauma in that population, so you kind of get a sort of a snapshot of how pervasive the problem is, what kinds of issues, males, females, and I know even in Uganda, the issue of gender becomes an issue when you start talking about having groups you have mixed groups. Or can you have a mixed group presentation of male-female therapists? So there are a lot of complications connected with how you kind of organize the structure, and I don't have all the solutions to it. A lot of it's going to be a discovery process for us as we try to connect and find out from them exactly what the lay of the land is, essentially. But you have to start someplace. And one of the issues here in San Diego for a long time was to train paraprofessionals to provide those services and enable good supervision from a more experienced licensed practitioner would help them kind of work through some of the clinical issues that we struggling with as they provide services.
Dr. J, or just to add something to that, after talking to an advisor who works in Friends with Orphans on the ground there, right now they have art therapy, they just call it art therapy, a lot of singing. They do have groups 3 times a week, and they're just talking about whatever comes up for them. But like Dr. J said, figuring out that component of gender, what's the gender going to be of the therapist? Are they going to accept Nick there as, talking to the females, me talking to the males? And that's what we really need to figure out. But they are definitely responding to the healing of just being loved and just being taken care of in that theater therapy that we would call it here.
Natural question, I wanted to supplement on what the doctor said and pretty much have said. Mostly you have to try to find the solution of what they use in their community, and then you supplement it. Then you can take your clinical method and then apply to that, and then try to use it. And then another thing, there are some research which has been done already from some areas. I have some research I can give you. Then you can use that, compare with other health issues, find them health worker being in the area before, that how did you define this, how do you go about this? So work with the local people, work with the client themselves, ask them what is better for them, how can you go about it?
The gentleman next to you.
Yes, I just want to add something also. My name is Joel, and I'm from South Sudan community, and I just want to add what Mr. Walker has been mentioned. And I know Northern Uganda is part of the South Sudan and its border. And whatever is in Northern Sudan, this is a hiding place for them, whatever they affect, the area that affect the South Sudan. And then in 2011, after South Sudan got independent, that's why the South Sudan government brought the peace agreement between the rebel of Uganda and after they failed to have agreement, the South Sudan told them you will not be leaving this area because this affects the South Sudan government. So now they moved to Central Africa, and that's why they pushed it the area. And now the peace has become there in Uganda because the South Sudan controls the area, and they don't want these people to be in their neighborhood and to be in their border while they are not accepting the peace agreement that has been signed to deal with it. So the question now, what do the governments of Uganda give in terms of resources to protect these people? And what about if there is a relief or worker want to go there? Do they have a protection for these people?
It's a great question. It's a political question.
Mr. Lam, could you address the question?
Right now I would say Northern Uganda is safe, and through Alliance we have sent several people from here. They went, provided services, and came back safely. So safety at the moment is something that should not even come to your mind as a problem.
Gender has come up a couple of times, Walter, and I don't know as much about Uganda as you do. The clients who we've seen from Uganda, women, are some of the worst rape cases we have ever seen. And I don't know if it's just the kinds of clients we see or if it's fairly prevalent in Uganda. It's multiple rapes, gang rapes, numerous times, surgeries afterwards. It's been painful in so many ways. So if you could address that, because we were talking about gender, men being with women, there may not be a cultural taboo, but there just might be some trauma there that we all need to be aware of. But I don't know.
It's unfortunate that the situation in Uganda, sex has been used as a method of war in Uganda at the moment. And when I talked of being helpless and not being in a position to protect your own family, but now I can tell you of several cases that I know of that women were raped in front of their husband, daughters raped in front of their husbands out there by groups of people out there. So it's a common thing. The fortunate thing in Uganda at the moment, from what I know, providing counseling, your gender will not be an issue. And they work with anybody out there, whether male, female, and can provide services to the opposite sex. And I don't think you will be faced with any problem out there. So the violence, I think it's something that I would say it's the pattern that you're talking about here. And it's a case that sometimes we see with the refugees that we're bringing in here. I always go to schools out there and tell them, when you buy a computer or any equipment that you bring into your classroom, you train everybody how to use it. Now we are bringing human beings, you just dump them into class, not even wondering to find out their background, where they're coming from, some of the things they've gone through. So I've always offered to go and speak in schools out there when we bring new groups of refugees and educate them what these people have gone through. And this has been very, very helpful in the school district here.
Is there anyone else in the back that has a question? Okay, we're going to be finishing in about 5 minutes. I'll have one last question, but go ahead.
I was struck by, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Oh,
Kathy. I'm familiar with survivors of torture somewhat, and at one point I gave them my sand tray and stuff to use. Part of what I loved what you said was, we're really talking about a human condition also. You talked about the healing relationship. And I think sometimes we forget in this country about the healing relationship being enough to begin the process. And so I think if we start there, it's a way of opening up the doors to different cultures even. And we're not going to take our best practices necessarily and bring them to another country and another culture. But if we go with an open heart of healing, that's a huge start. And when I saw that video, I was really mesmerized by the enactment of the abduction, and it got me thinking about expressive arts, which we don't really do that much in this country anymore because it's not technically best practices, doesn't fit into 8 sessions, and expressive arts are the painting, the drum circles, the not docudrama, that's television, it's late, this morning. The psychodrama, the sand tray. There are so many ways of healing trauma without a language, without necessarily stepping in cultures, but just, engaging in what people do when they're telling their story. And I know SCARE, for the Native Americans, bringing back the circles, the drum circles, and sweat lodges. And it's going to be so exciting to take from that culture and see what we can develop. Talk about creativity. You know, because we can't go to a book and look up and go, this is under page 32, and what you do for trauma. But that's exciting. So there's stuff out there that really calls forth the healing perspective.
I could just add, one of the groups that we're doing right now for women from Africa and the Middle East is using collages and narrative therapy. And we're saying we can't take any more women into this group, as opposed to women. Usually in groups, you have fewer and fewer participants. We have more and more participants. They're telling their neighbors, they're telling their friends, they're letting them come. And it's collages, and it's narrative therapy, and it's telling their story, and it's having it validated. If I could go back to talking about children, you know, in any culture, children act out what they see. That's what children do. It's play. It's not talk therapy. And so it is no surprise that what we saw in the video is probably what you're going to see as well. And so to be able, it's clinical, but to be able to contain it and validate and help them move through that and come up with some other healthy understandings of what life could be like. I'm very excited about the project as well.
Okay, and so thank you, our panelists. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly, I think, you know, understanding the conflict and the layers of the conflict is very, very important, you know, for us. In many cases in Africa, it's not so much about, religious or anything. It's more political or territory, you know, and understanding it is very important. And in many, many, many cases, you know, some of the, militias, they use, if you fight with men, you either kill or they kill you. But one of the things is, one of the victims is women and children, and this is part of, intimidation, and really using that as a weapon as well. And I have recently have a conversation with a man who lost, his family members, his wife and his daughter, and he said, I'm not worthy to live. I didn't protect them. So living with that guilt and that mental health is not only, the victim, but also, the fighters or the family members. So I think understanding the dynamic of the conflict is very, very important.
With that,
we have materials.
Oh yes,
So
with that, we want to, we're going to ask one more question to the audience in just a bit, but before we do, I want to applaud our panelists for the very good And before we end this conversation, later on we're going to be giving out some awards. We have another presentation. But before we do so, appropriately this event is called the War on Hope. And what I want to present to the audience is that as you've seen this before you and you have a new awareness, a higher awareness to some of the social needs there in Uganda for child soldiers. In one breath and one word, I want you to speak what you hope for them in Uganda. And anyone in the audience, you have a few minutes, please speak one more, one breath. Peace.
Growth, recovery, happiness,
awareness,
faith,
healing,
dignity, resiliency.
Thank you. Oh, are there any others? Thank you.
So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up here, but before we do, we wanted to recognize lot of this. She's the USD mastermind behind how to maneuver this bureaucratic system, so she helped us get through all the red tape to put this on. And then in addition to that, we wanted to recognize our panelists for taking their time and staying with us until past 9 o'clock at night, for their time and their love and their appreciation for what we're doing here today as well. So thank you guys again.
And I get no prerogative here because I'm the advisor for Asia. So we have this one is for Nick Boyd. And Justine, better known as JoJo.
So as you guys are leaving today, feel free to take as much food as you guys go. Also, there's a donation box in the back. We're not asking for anything. You guys are welcome, but nothing. But all of the donations that we receive here are going to go to FRO to help with the clinical program. In addition to the clinical program, the social programs and everything else that's already in place. So, and then finally, there are T-shirts over there. I think I mentioned earlier. They're like $15. That's the sponsor of FRO that they directly fund a lot of educational and infrastructure there. So feel free. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. It means the world. Joe and I really appreciate it. We've worked really hard, and we're really excited to what the future brings going forward, the clinical work we're going to be doing over in Uganda and FRO. And our vision is big, and we hope to work way outside of Uganda, to work most of East Africa, and truly help the people of that country, but as well as our community here in San Diego. So thanks again.
We just would like you to fill out a survey because it would help us just move forward in the future, what you guys liked, what you guys didn't like, what you guys would like to see at an event like this. That would very much help us out. Thanks. And sign in if you are.